Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, March 22nd, 2020, and today we're going to be discussing Joe Biden's best chance at the electoral map in 2020. So essentially, let's say Joe Biden is the nominee and he faces Donald Trump and the election goes smoothly, like a 2008 repeat. And Joe Biden all of a sudden seems to be outperforming, or not necessarily outperforming, but doing his best performance in every single state, swing states and safe states alike. What would that electoral map look like? Well, first of all, a lot of things would have to happen in order for this to be an actual circumstance where we would start to see safe Republican states start forming likely Republican states, safe Democratic states, going even further to the left, toss-up states becoming lean likely states. What would have to happen in that scenario? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the old 2016 presidential electoral map and just decide what changes from there. What gives Joe Biden an even better, I guess, mark than Hillary Clinton, and by what margin, just based off of a best-case scenario for the Democrats. Obviously, this is not my prediction. I do not think that this is going to happen. I don't even think it's going to be considered as likely to happen, mainly because in a scenario where it's the best case for either candidate, a lot of things are going to have to happen to benefit them, and obviously that is not the case in 2020. This will be still a very contentious election season, regardless of who the Democratic nominee is, and as we continue on, regardless of what polling data says, election night will more than likely be close. So Donald Trump won the last election with 306 electoral votes. Hillary Clinton got 232. Let's say Joe Biden, very basic, flips the three Rust Belt states that were already considered, I guess, toss-ups. Once we add in these margins, let's go ahead and take a look at the 2016 margins for, I guess, the Democrats. If you just take a look at what they were pretty close. Other than Donald Trump winning in those three Rust Belt states, he had a pretty solid hold in a number of other states. Ohio and Iowa were likely states, while Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida were lean states. Just taking a look at the rest of the electoral map, it wasn't exactly, I guess, a blowout for President Trump, but definitely a really good look. He won a number of states that Democrats had always had a hold on, including the Rust Belt, for 24, 28 years, depending on which state you're looking at. So almost 3 decades of Democrats winning there in the presidential election. Donald Trump changed. Let's go ahead and take a look. I'm not going to fill in the rest of the safe states that I consider safe right now based off of margin, because they're probably not going to change against the Democrats. Obviously more so in favor of the Democrats. But let's go ahead and take a look. So let's move that one into lean. So I could be wrong or off by a particular state, but this was the, I guess, margin in 2016 in terms of lean and likely states. I didn't fill in the Rust Belt because let's say this is Joe Biden's best performance. We could still see the Rust Belt be likely at most. Even in Joe Biden's best performance, it probably won't be a 16.5 margin like the one we saw in Michigan in 2008 or in any of those other 2 states. It'll still be a large margin. Don't get me wrong. If it's a best case scenario for Joe Biden, we're talking about 11 to 13 point margin, but probably not breaking into that safe category. Those states have become increasingly more polarized to a point where even if it is the best case for the Democrats, they're still probably not going to win there by a safe margin. Same thing goes in Minnesota. Surprisingly for Donald Trump, I actually think he might fare a little bit better there, just because if you take a look at the other states, they voted for him, and it didn't look like they're too happy. It doesn't look like they're too happy with the way that he's performing right now in office, just based off approval rating polls, whereas Minnesota probably won't be as angry towards the president, considering that it's already a Democratic state, voted for Hillary Clinton, and it'll likely be around the same margin, but it probably won't be too much larger, if larger at all. And also, Minnesota, out of all the states, I would say is definitely trending a little bit more red than the rest of them, and it still is a Democratic state on the presidential level. So that puts Joe Biden immediately at a victory. Let's take a look at some of these safe states that we need to go ahead and alter down for the Democratic Party. Now, states like South Carolina and Mississippi, I definitely see becoming likely states, no longer safe states, including Indiana and Missouri. Now, I know that seems like a long stretch, but also Barack Obama almost won Missouri. He barely lost it. It was less than a percentage point dividing him and John McCain. He won Indiana, South Carolina, Mississippi just generally have a very large African-American population that definitely could make a big impact on the electorate if they actually come out and vote. And if Joe Biden has done anything this primary season, it is drive up turnout. If you take a look at a number of these states, in southern states, almost, I think, 100% turnout in one of them, either Mississippi, I believe it is Mississippi, 60, 70% turnout in Virginia. I mean, this is amongst Democrats, but when you're bringing out Democrats in a primary where it's as contested as it was in 2016, it definitely shows that you are a candidate who can bring out voters in the general election. If you're bringing out Democratic primary voters that never voted in a primary, you can only imagine what they would bring out in the general election. You could bring out Democratic voters that haven't voted since 2008, since 2012, that didn't vote until 2016, and that could be very beneficial to Joe Biden's campaign. Enough so that states such as Colorado and New Mexico, despite having not too big of African-American populations, move over into the likely Democratic column, and say for the state of New Mexico. This is what is just bound to happen. These are Democratic states regardless, and it is very likely that Joe Biden does this regardless of this being his best case, mainly because of the fact that Joe Biden already has a pretty strong hold on the area, despite what the Democratic primary might say. If you take a look at history, generally they do vote with the Democratic nominee, and also the 2018 midterms definitely were a good sign for Democrats in Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico, and it has been a very trending blue type area. And also that brings me over to Arizona and Texas. In Joe Biden's best case, he will win the state of Arizona. That's not out of the question at this point. Martha McSally lost the state of Arizona, and she's on the ballot yet again in 2020. She's not going to be exciting anyone to vote in the Senate election, much less the presidential election. And Arizona is already a state that pretty much said no to Donald Trump in 2016 by drastically narrowing the margin compared to 2012. And if you take a look at the Democrats that perform well in Arizona, it's centrist Democrats. And if you take a look at the Republicans that perform well, it's McCain, Romney type Republicans, not Donald Trump candidates. And if you take a look at the primaries too for the Republicans there, Donald Trump, sure, won the primary in Arizona, but if you take a look at the Senate primaries, governor primaries, you don't see Trump-like candidates winning there. We have Doug Ducey as a governor there. We have Martha McSally and Kristen Sinema. Kristen Sinema is a centrist Democrat, by the way. She was a part of the Blue Dog Coalition. A lot of people said she was painted as a progressive. That's not true. She's almost a conservative. But Arizona could possibly have another Democratic senator, Mark Kelly, come down in 2020, but Arizona I definitely see going to Joe Biden in his best case. As for Donald Trump, he's probably not going to lose his grip on Texas. No Republican really should be losing their grip on Texas, but it could narrow up. If 2018 showed anything, Texas is within striking distance of the Democratic Party within the near future. And unfortunately for Republicans, if they lose Texas, it's pretty much game over for the rest of the presidential elections unless something changes fast. Joe Biden will likely also carry North Carolina in his best case. Not so much Georgia. I actually think that one should just narrow down to a tilt margin, which means less than 1%, but I'm still not seeing a Joe Biden victory. But we could see Joe Biden carry the state of Florida. That's not out of the question for the general election either, though it does have a Republican history and tend to side with the Republicans in the midterm elections in 2016. It's not out of the question. It's still a swing state regardless, and the last time a Democrat won it was when Joe Biden was on the ballot with Barack Obama in 2012. So it's not exactly the biggest leap, especially considering that it's going to be focused on by the Democratic Party heavily. There is no Senate election, though, but there will be one in 2022, which obviously we don't need to talk about right now. New Hampshire would just be likely at most. I'm still thinking 12, 13% margin, not going to see it go safe. Maine at large will go probably likely in Joe Biden's best case, and also Joe Biden could likely carry Maine's 2nd district, probably still by a lean margin, but looking at Trump's approval rating across the Northeast looks pretty much abysmal at this point. So I'm not so sure or confident that he will even win Maine's 2nd district as it comes around yet again. Was a huge swing from Obama to Trump in 2016. So it is likely that it swings back to the Obama coalition, which is represented by Vice President Biden. As for Ohio and Iowa, These are two states that do have a possibility of going to Joe Biden. I'm not seeing all of a sudden Barack Obama numbers in Iowa or in Ohio, but I'm seeing a lean margin for Joe Biden in his best case. And when you're taking a look at this map, again, this is not my prediction. This is not how I think the 2020 election will go. This is purely if everything works out for Joe Biden. Tomorrow's video will be if everything works out for Donald Trump. So expect to see around the similar margins, except instead of blue leading, obviously the Republicans would be leading. And Ohio and Iowa, they're not completely out of direction for Joe Biden, but definitely a little bit harder than the Rust Belt or possibly even Arizona. As for Nebraska's 2nd district, it would only narrowly go to the Democrats in their best case. Probably not going to see anything else other than that. But just taking a look at the rest of the map, we could possibly see Montana or Kansas narrow up to a likely margin, but probably nothing less for the Republican Party at this point. So in the Democrats' best case scenario, I would say that Joe Biden gets 359 electoral votes compared to Donald Trump at 179. It's close to the 2008 margin, but the Republicans fare a little bit better. But tomorrow's video will be Donald Trump in his best case scenario, so you should see a lot more red on the map. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. A lot of the videos I've been doing recently are suggestion based. I should have a pretty big election night coming up within the next 2 weeks. I'm working with another YouTuber on that, so make sure to stay tuned for that one. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching this video again, and I will see you all tomorrow.